Blog Talk Radio.
You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on Skag and skip out for beer during commercials because the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures of Nixon blowing a bugle and leading a charge by John Mitchell, General Abrams, and Mendel Rivers to eat hog maws confiscated from a Harlem sanctuary. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by the Schaefer Award Theater and will not star Natalie Woods and Steve McQueen or Bullwinkle and Julia. The revolution will not give your mouth sex appeal. The revolution will not get rid of the nubs. The revolution will not make you look 5 pounds thinner. The revolution will not be televised, brother. There will be no pictures of you and Willie Mae pushing that shopping cart down the block on the dead run or trying to slide that color TV into a stolen ambulance. NBC will not be able to predict the winner at 8:32 on reports from 29 districts. The revolution will not be televised. There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. There will be no pictures of Whitney Young being run out of Harlem on a rail with a brand new process. There will be no slow motion or still life of Roy Wilkins strolling through Watts in a red, black, and green liberation jumpsuit that he had been saving for just the right occasion. Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, and Hooterville Junction will no longer be so goddamn relevant, and women will not care if Dick finally screwed Jane on Search for Tomorrow because black people will be in the street looking for a brighter day. The revolution will not be televised. There will be no highlights on the 11 o'clock news and no pictures of Harry-armed women liberationists and Jackie Onassis blowing her nose. The theme song will not be written by Jim Webb or Francis Scott Keys, nor sung by Glenn Campbell, Tom Jones, Johnny Cash, or Engelbert Humperdinck. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be right back after a message about a white tornado, white lightning, or white people. You will not have to worry about a dove in your bedroom, the tiger in your tank, or the giant in your toilet bowl. The revolution will not go better with Coke. The revolution will not fight germs that may cause bad breath. The revolution will put you in the driver's seat. The revolution will not be televised, will not be televised, not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers. The revolution will be live.
Hey, good evening and welcome to another edition of the Batchelor News radio show. I'm L.A. Batchelor. Hope all is well with you wherever you're listening. We appreciate you joining in. 646-929-0130, the number to get in touch with us. Any comments, any questions, hit us up there on Facebook at Pad Nation or LA Batchelor, on Twitter at Pad Nation 2 at Twitter, and on Instagram. And we will be on Facebook Live pretty soon. Want to bring in my first guest. Certainly, we played some Gil Scott Heron. If you're not familiar with him, called The Revolution. Sure, this young man is. He is a best-selling author, and he deals in unions and protests, and certainly historical things as it relates to people of color from my good state of Connecticut. He is Andy Piascik. And, Andy, always good to have you on, and I hope all is well with you. I know the pandemic continues there in my state, and I just hope you and your family are okay.
Thanks again for having me on, L.A. Yes, everybody in my immediate circle is doing well and hoping for the best, and that the worst is past, at least for this part of the country.
Well, I know I can't I want to get up there and see my sister, and that's probably not going to happen because I'm in one of those states that Connecticut says you can't come. So we'll move forward from there. Just wanted to ask you. You heard Gil Scott Heron and that in terms of revolution. Revolution looks at like a lot of different things, especially as it relates to protest. One of the most laughable things, Andy, to me, in protest in itself, is that people protest in different ways. So you can protest on the streets whether it be as we see with the shooting of George Floyd, which goes beyond that, respectfully, in terms of police brutality, racism. You can put the isms under there. Like, people are fed up in the inequality. So you see that, but then you see people protesting, or maybe a different word, fighting back or getting off the sidelines in a lot of ways, posting stuff. We call these, quote, Karens and social media. My platform, what you write, listen, and people need to check out Andy. We'll get to all that. You write about the plight of African Americans in the NFL, the fact that they were talented but they weren't allowed. That's inequality. So there's a lot of different ways to protest, yet I hear so many people, black, white, everybody, in some cases, not all, that have issues with protest. So speak to that the fact that people want to protest, they can do it in their own skin and their own mannerism, as long as it's leading to a better good, I would think.
I think the best way to look at it is to understand that when you're organizing and protesting against entrenched power, there will always be some kind of backlash. So I think, to take a step back, the first thing that we have to understand is that this wave of protest that kicked off 5-6 weeks ago in the immediate aftermath of the murder of George Floyd has been incredibly successful. In just that short amount of time, important inroads have been made, locale by locale, some to degree at the federal level. So I think let's set aside the backlash for the moment and just say we've accomplished a lot, and it's been directly as a result of militant protests, multifaceted protests like you talked about, people protesting in whatever way they're most able to do. But the fact that there's been a core of people in many, many different places who have been willing to go face to face with the police in the face of violence, in the face of pepper spray, people defying curfews, people continuing to occupy spaces until 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, knowing that there was always the threat of some kind of attack. I think the militant nature of the protests is what really has pushed the concessions that have been made so far and made those possible. So we should first of all recognize that and embrace it, and understand that anybody who's against us or who's on the sidelines saying, look, you guys really need to slow down, our answer has to be no, for a lot of reasons. But first of all, because it illustrates that protests work. Now, there's a long way to go, and there's all kinds of different things that can happen, but I think the spirit of the protests has to continue, and now we see people finding new ways to express, besides just sort of the marches and rallies that took place 3-4 weeks in many, many different cities. We had an encampment here for 8 days in Bridgeport, where I live, that was successful, where people camped out in front of police headquarters. Technically, of course, it was illegal, but they were organized. It was a large enough group, and they pushed their demands. And although not all the demands were met, the City Council of Bridgeport agreed to some of them. And now people are going to regroup. And now, lo and behold, no sooner did the encampment in Bridgeport end, but one sprang up in New York City at City Hall Park. Much larger, of course, because New York City is a much bigger place, but basically the idea is the same. And then in Seattle, a large number of people have established what's called an autonomous zone, and they're still there. They're being threatened by the mayor now. They've been reviled by right-wing media and by the president, but people are still finding ever creative ways to express their outrage and to try to continue to push for the changes that we need. So I think it has to continue to be multifaceted. It has to be where people can participate at whatever level they're able to. Overwhelmingly, what I've seen is it's younger people who are in the lead, and that's perfectly natural, and it's the way it should be probably. And now, we face questions that we can get into during this discussion as to how best to keep going with the momentum that we've built so far.
Andy, there's two things that concern me, though, in the midst of these protests. And one is that word occupier. We know that code means when it was used in the civil rights era. These occupiers, these instigators that come in. And it could be, we could debate and discuss on if they're homegrown people that are trying to stir up the pot, or people coming in, these outside instigators or occupiers. I should have said instigators, these outside instigators that are coming in. We heard that during the King Civil Rights days. And then the other part of it is when you look at the protests, that people are concerned that the momentum, as you mentioned, will go away. And if it goes away, it's because of people being idle and not getting involved, as you mentioned. Are you on the sideline, or what are you doing in your world to make change? So speak to that in terms of protesting and the fact that, things have died down because mainstream media, and I don't consider you a part of that, I certainly am not, mainstream media will let this go. We shall overcome, and everything's nice, and everybody's peaceful, and we holding hands, but nothing has changed, no policies or anything along those lines. And that whole, outside instigators, that term tends to be negative in the sense that certainly we've seen people do bad things, but the way it's used gives me an ill feeling about how they talked about when they denied that racism exists, that these hangings exist, that the Freedom Riders weren't killed in the 60s. Dr. King was an instigator, an outside instigator. Our Negroes are fine. We don't need no help here. So that term still kind of resonates kind of in the wrong way as well with some black folks.
Let me talk about the second point first, and then I'll get to the first point. I think the key thing as to what will go forward is how well we continue to organize ourselves, how well we continue to work across racial lines, along class lines, along bringing as many people as possible into this who are sincerely dedicated to doing something about it without having anything get watered down. We don't want to have it be just a bunch of mush that anybody and their brother and sister can agree to, even if they're not really on board with what we're saying. I think the important thing to recognize, just go back for a second, the organizing work and the organizations that have been established and have been doing the kind of thankless, hard work for many, many years really are what made what we've seen the last 5 or 6 weeks possible. If you don't have that, then you don't really see, to the degree that we've seen, these protests and demonstrations and encampments and everything else. So organization is essential. What I would say to people is find an organization that's doing this kind of work and join it. It's much more difficult during this time because of the pandemic, so people have to be creative in how they do that. Hopefully at some point before too long, it'll become possible to do more things in person with large numbers of people. But people need to join these organizations, and if you're in a place where no such organization exists, get your buddies together who are out there and build a new organization. It can be whatever people feel is needed for their specific locale. It can be multi-issue, it can be single issue, and it also involves coalition building between organizations that already exist that don't necessarily maybe focus on police violence, but that can be brought into a coalition that's addressing that issue. As far as the first point, I think it's a dangerous thing to put too much credibility on the mainstream fanning up the idea of outside instigators and agitators being so prominent, because as far as I can see, that's not the case. And the degree to which people who come in and maybe do things, or people from the location itself who do things that are provocative and inappropriate, the degree that can be prevented will depend on how well organized and how strong the base is among, whatever city you happen to be in. Because we have a long, long history, first of all movements being attacked because they're being led by outside agitators. And you captured it perfectly. There were Dixiecrats and people down south who said, this was all just some kind of northern plot when the civil rights movement began to bubble over in the late 50s and early 60s. Anybody looking at reality would know that that's absolutely not the case. And we can see clearly 60 years removed that was a tactic meant to defend the status quo. I think we have to think in terms of the same way today. No matter what is done, even if it can be documented that a lot of these people are police agents, which a lot of them are, let's make no mistake about that. A lot of these people, I've seen things online, have been documented that these are police agents or paramilitary right-wing groups who are coming in either to kind of get their kicks or to discredit what we're doing.
Right.
So I think, but when you have knowledgeable, experienced people and you have enough of them, it's much easier to recognize the person who's making the inappropriate suggestion or who's screaming at the top of their lungs, let's go burn down the bank, or let's go burn down CNN, or let's go whatever it might be. Let's all go home and get guns and start shooting at the police. The weaker you are and the less organized you are, the more susceptible you are to having that become a problem. So I don't particularly feel like it's any kind of a problem at the level that it's being talked about in mainstream circles. And we would perfectly expect that they would talk about that and focus in on that. Even the so-called liberal media.
Sure.
But we need to be clear when we're talking to potential allies or our family members who maybe are somewhat sympathetic, but they're not completely sold, or they're hearing all this stuff about agitators. They're a tiny minority. They're not necessarily reflective of what we're trying to do. And some of them are clearly people who are infiltrators, who are part of the police or some extension of the police, who are here to make trouble and make us look bad.
Ed, you make a great point. I just want to bring up a couple of those points. We're talking with Andy Piascik. Of course, he's a best-selling author. He's a writer, activist, and certainly talks about and knows about unions. I'm going to get to that, but I think it's interesting that you mentioned a couple of things. America didn't get engaged in civil rights until, quite frankly, in my humble opinion, and the data kind of shows that, until our Jewish brothers and sisters were killed as freedom riders. When those kids went missing, along with those black kids, then America really said, oh my God, this is really a problem, and we've lost our way. The second point of what you said speaks to the media and the fact that there might be, and see, this is what I believe, and I believe I agree with you, that there are police organizations or states out there or sympathizers that want to have these implants. And I think sometimes, black or white, in these protests, in today's protests, we can't get diverted to what the real cause is. So we need to stay away from that. Let me ask you this, Andy. When you are someone who's fought for unions, even in my home state, where you fought for equal rights and equal pay and all of the and real benefits for unions. How do you wrap your mind around this police fraternity, this blue wall? And by the way, it's not a black or white thing; it's a police thing, because the brothers are too black. I mean, not black enough. They too blue. They not black enough, so they not seeing themselves. And the white officers are not speaking up. This union is really, really strong. It's problem number one for me. So how do you fix that? What do you do? We've heard dismantle and all that words have been kind of thrown around, and of course the other side wants to make it seem like we don't want police. But how do you deal with something like that? As a union supporter, someone who understands the respect and the dignity and the equality of unions, how do you deal with this police union that's so strong and so tied with prosecutors and the judicial system?
Well, I think we really have to look at the police unions around the country as a special or a different case. I don't consider them really to be part of the labor movement, mainly because of the role of what the police are empowered to do, what their role is in the society. Now, one way that it can be dealt with is happening in different places. The one that I've read about most prominently was in Kings County, Washington, which includes the city of Seattle, where the Central Labor Council has proposed or passed a resolution expelling the police union from the Labor Council. So that is certainly something that can be done in any number of places, again, maybe mostly on a local level. The reason I think that it hasn't come to the fore the way it should have many, many years ago, and is still not really coming to the fore even now amidst all of what we're seeing, is that you have a labor leadership that is really disconnected from rank and file workers. They really do have a different agenda. Their thing is they want to get along and they want to, be a part of the system, not make waves, have as much influence in the Democratic Party primarily as they can, and as a result, they often take really terrible positions on a number of issues.
But Andy, can I just stop you real quick just to make the follow up on that? So when you deal with unions like the union, like you said, real labor unions, you want what's good for the worker, because the workers are doing the work. They should be part of everything. We know they should be getting stock and everything up the chain, because they are the ones who makes this America, not to steal it from that guy occupying the White House, makes this country great. But with the police, I understand standing up for police for pensions and pay increases and things of that nature, but how do you stand for somebody killing an innocent person? That makes no sense. And in a way, Andy, I've read and did some research. It's not just the rank and file. There are cops that feel like they're being mistreated based on bad cops. And I'm not saying all cops are bad, but you have to speak out. It's a difference if you're making 35 and you should want to make 42, or 67 and you should make $78,000 or something like that. That's one thing. But how do you stand on the side or the wrong side when people are getting killed and you don't speak up and say this is wrong? That's not a union to me.
Well, it's a protection racket, really, is what it is. Because as I said, and I can't emphasize this enough, the police are a different entity as far as workers than anybody else, except, maybe correction officers. I don't want to get into that. That's a whole different thing. I think the role of the police is to keep the population in line, and we see very clearly in cases like where you have rebellions and protests, that's what they're doing. Now, I think to the degree that there are people who are going to come forward, and there have been some in few cases, who, there's a culture within police that to undermine the force as a whole is like the worst possible sin that you can commit. So there's tremendous pressure from the top down, from all sides, when you're a police officer, to do what is expected of them, which is, no matter how blatant the act is, you rally behind whoever it was that did it, because, whatever, all the reasons that they give you. Oh, it's incredibly difficult to be a police officer. Oh, we're out here putting our lives on the line 8 hours a day, every day, blah, 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 blah. So what I will say is I think there can be some fissures within the police, because I don't think that African-American cops are as comfortable with this kind of thing as the white officers are. And we've seen around the country, police chiefs taking a knee with protesters. Now, I personally think a lot of that is for show, and in some cases, the very places where that happened, like an hour later, the police were back in riot mode. So we have to be careful about that. But I think everything that you're saying is right. I mean, there should be more outrage when you see a blatant murder like we saw in Minneapolis or like we saw in Aurora, Colorado last year. We can go on for an hour naming all the recent cases. Why isn't there? That's the nature of the police force, and why I think people are saying we can't just pass a couple of little resolutions over here or put a Band-Aid on over here. It really has to go to the core of what role the police play in the society. And that's a really, really big discussion. There are going to be honest differences about it. And hopefully, change will come. And a lot of it will have to come, I think, as other things in the society are transformed as well. Economic inequality. I've been writing about that as a problem going back to the 70s when I first became an activist. It goes hand in hand. It's not. We should not dilute the issue of police violence by bringing all these other things in, but it is related. Definitely. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I said definitely. Look, you're right.
No, the super rich are the people who the police are protecting from us. They have a great system here for themselves. You look at how many billions and billions of dollars have been transferred to the richest people during this pandemic. That's just emblematic of what's been going on in the country for the last 45 years, and which is going to continue unless we figure out a way to do something about it. But ultimately, the super rich are the ones who the police are protecting.
And let me just say this too. That I get you. I do think though. I believe that there is the issue with the fraternal unions in policing. There's a moral compass, and there are some people that should not have guns, that have hate in their heart, that are on the police force. So I think it goes a little beyond protecting, more so about protecting because there's a way of systematic racism that's going on. But I will absolutely, totally agree with you about, and that's why I was talking about diversion. It's not just police brutality. It's housing, it's education, it's jobs, it's even in the unions. You're right. It goes to all of that. And we need to address it all. We need to address it in the manners that they need to be addressed. But it's not just, like I said, with all due respect and love and prayers to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and everybody else, it's even bigger than the police brutality part. It's an ism that you talk about that's there that we don't want to deal with. And as it relates to black law enforcement, so what? If you're uncomfortable, so what? I mean, come to the table. I'm black, you black. You know what's going on. So if you're uncomfortable, I'm sorry, but get in line, get with it. If you're going to stand for the good, you're going to stand for the bad. And I mean, that's officers in general, but black officers shouldn't. You black. You know what's going on. So if you're uncomfortable, that's not my problem. You need to either be on the right side or on the wrong side. You're either going to be on the sideline or you're going to get and make some form of change. I'm not saying that, again, we talked about in the beginning, Andy, about how you make change and protest and everything. I get that. So you do your part, but do your part. Whatever it is, do it. You can't be silent at this point. There's no option to be silent. If you're a black police officer or chief or law enforcement, FBI, I don't care where you are, and you know these things going on, you step your game up. You need to man up and do what you need to do. So my final question to you is, you know the history of protesting. You know the history of protesting or walking a picking line for unions. What's the difference then, say, as you mentioned, the 70s, you had the normal raise and the women's movement and the things that started there, to now, and how can it be so effective? We've said, like you said, 5 weeks or so, it's been effective. How can it be effective even moving forward? And I do see my next guest on the line. I just want to acknowledge him so I see him. But how can it be really effective, sir?
Well, I think, I don't have a crystal ball, and I think there are a lot smarter people who are more deeply involved in this than I am. I mean, like I said early on, it's overwhelmingly young people. They have new and creative ideas that I probably never wouldn't even thought of. I think a lot of this is to be determined. The main thing is we have to build organizations. We have to keep going out and doing these actions, coming up with ideas for new actions, finding ways to involve new people. I think one of the main things that will be essential is that white people, white activists, no matter how much experience you have got to be willing to take leadership from black people. And that's not an easy thing. The record is not the best. It involves, respecting the fact that there, as you indicated very importantly, there is a specific dimension to policing that impacts black people way, way out of proportion to the way it affects anybody else. And I think that we need to figure out, in what ways are we going to try to connect these issues? Are we going to try to connect them? And I think history shows that when you have a multiracial movement, multiracial organizations, that they're generally more effective working together that way. But it's also, as I said, I can't repeat this enough, white radicals, white activists, and so far what I've seen indicates that we're making pretty good progress, have got to be able to take leadership from black people. That has sometimes been an Achilles heel of movements in the past, and we really, I think, need to double down on making sure it doesn't become a problem now. And I think, that's for people like me, people with some history and with some experience, to organize among whites and not just underscore the issues that they need to get on board with, but also to look, you have been taught all along, whether you know it or not, that you're superior and that you know better. You need to put all of that off to the side, because it's not true, first of all, and second of all, it will be incredibly destructive to whatever we're trying to build here.
Yeah. Andy, before you go, let people know how they can follow you, reach out to you, see your work. Always good stuff, always profound info, but let people know how they can follow you, sir.
Definitely. What you said about alternative media earlier is of the absolute essential to all of this. Your show, websites like counterpunch.org, which publish my work, ZNet, which is another one, the Black Alliance for Peace, all these different outlets. You can have stuff delivered to your inbox every day, no charge. You can go to the website and read 5, 10, 15 different articles at no charge. We really need to educate ourselves and not let people at CNN or MSNBC control the agenda.
Right, and Fox. Andy, I appreciate you, sir. God bless you. Be careful. I'll talk with you soon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, L.A., very much.
Jonathan Bob presents talk radio like you've never heard it before on the Batchelor News Radio Network. We go live every Tuesday and Wednesday on this network, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Go to thebatchelornews.airtime.pro.
We are on the cutting edge, and we are ahead of the curve on what is happening while the media tries to catch up.
We talk issues from right to left.
Once a month, we have Ladies' Night, where we talk relationship in the 21st century, and nothing is off limits or taboo.
Donaldson Files on the Batchelor News Radio Network.
Welcome back to the show. If you're missing any part of our broadcast, do go to our show. We are, the rebroadcast is at 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. Eastern at our website, thebatchelornews.airtime.pro, thebatchelornews.airtime.pro. We love to hear from you. Music, other shows, of course, there, and topics as well. I want to bring in my next guest. He is a former colonel, U.S. Army, retired. He is the General Raymond E. Mason Jr. Chair of Military History and, of course, commentator on this broadcast. Always good to have his insight as it relates, just not in the military, but the common sense approach to government. He is Dr. Peter Mansoor. And, Doctor, it's always good to have you on. I hope all is well in Ohio, you and your family, and everybody is safe and protected, sir.
Well, thanks, L.A. We're actually doing great. We got back from a extended vacation in Lake Tahoe where we were able to see our granddaughter for the first time.
Oh, my God, that's awesome. Is that your first grand?
That's our first grandchild, and to remain socially distant, we camped our way across the United States. It was awesome.
Wow. And I know it had to be I guess you had to pick her up and hold her with mask, I guess, on at the very least.
Well, actually, we were pretty confident that we were clear, and we know our daughter and their family has been quarantining as well. So all was well once we got there.
Good. That's a blessing. I'm happy for you. I want to bring you on because the man who occupies the White House has been using the authorization of use of military force in a lot of different ways. Certainly, if you look at the joint resolution of the United States Congress, became law, I think it was, 2001, authorizing use of force against those responsible. And that was for September 11th, Doctor. September 11th, when we had foreign agents come up here and killed so many Americans. This person occupying the White House has used it and threatened to use it in so many ways, not just state by state with the National Guard. Of course, the governors put those in place, but used it for a photo op. A photo op, which people might disagree with me, where he had the Bible up right, but if you look at the pictures, you do the research, he looked like Hitler when he had that whole photo op with the Bible in his hand. And so, what do you make as a colonel who's actually served, unlike him, who's actually been in combat with General Petraeus and everything? How does it make you feel when you see the President of the United States, trying to authorize use of force, and did with people who didn't have badges or anything, by the way, in that instance that you know of, using that against his own people, like the governors or even the District of Columbia couldn't handle that themselves?
It's absolutely outrageous, L.A. The use of federal troops in law enforcement role is strictly prescribed by Congress. It's not the authorization for the use of military force in 2001, which is directed out Al-Qaeda, that he's using. Rather, he's threatening to use the Insurrection Act of 1807. And just to tell you the high bar that this Insurrection Act must clear, the only times it's been used in U.S. history are during the Civil War, during Reconstruction, during the Civil Rights era, when most famously President Eisenhower used it to send federal troops into Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, to enforce desegregation. And then most recently in the Los Angeles riots of 1992, the Rodney King riots, when the city was literally up in flames and the governor requested the president to bring in federal troops to restore order. These are very high bars to clear in terms of the legislation. And President Trump is threatening to use it to suppress peaceful protests. Yes, there's some criminality going on in these protests, but it's not to the extreme extent that would require the 82nd Airborne Division to go into the District of Columbia, which they actually brought a battalion of the 82nd Airborne Division up to the D.C. And were planning to use it. And it's just ridiculous that this president, because he wants to run on a law and order platform in this upcoming presidential election, wants to use federal troops to suppress mostly peaceful protesters. And I think rightly so, there has been an outcry from a lot of senior retired military officers who have said this is unconscionable and it must stop.
I'm going to come back to that, but you mentioned the Insurrection Act of 1807. That's his, the president's, authority to deploy military and federalized National Guard troops within the country, in particular circumstances such as suppress civil disorder, insurrection, and rebellion. To your knowledge, and what you know, has that been civil disorder, insurrection, and rebellion for him to do that? And on top of the fact, the Powers Act. I mean, that's Act 10. I mean, the fact that he could just order these insurgents to come in, these military people to come in and do this. Has it been to that point to call that?
No, quite frankly. The protests have been by and large peaceful. Where there has been looting and violence, it's been short-lived and not ongoing, and nothing that state governors have not been able to control with both police and use of National Guard forces. Go back to the 1992 riots in Los Angeles. They were massive, and the National Guard of the state of California couldn't handle them. And so Governor Peter Wilson called George H.W. Bush and said, hey, look, I need some help. And so George H.W. Bush declared Los Angeles in rebellion against the United States, authority of the United States, and he moved the 7th Infantry Division from Fort Ord, California, down there to take over. And it worked. But none of these protests have reached that level of violence. And what we're seeing is, as time goes on now, most of the protests are peaceful. They're ongoing. People clearly want change. But the massive looting of the first few days is behind us for the most part.
Talking with Dr. Peter Mansoor here on the Batchelor News Radio Network. Doc, you mentioned, some military people speaking out, and certainly you've always been fair in terms of the issues. You've given a few credits to the president, but you've been very critical of his foreign policy and in this case use of force. But some people like myself, to be honest with you, Doctor and Colonel, are feeling like Johnny come lately. And I understand if you're in that administration and so you're serving, but if you're retired, Doc, why not speak out against him? Why not condemn him enough? This man has done enough. Forget about the civil rights stuff, but just the fact that you and I have talked about on this for a couple of years now in terms of what he's done to diminish our strength and our face and our perception in the world as it relates to foreign policy and military especially. Like these countries, you know better than I, they're not respecting this. He's pulled us out of a lot of those stuff. And now you have this protest. You have all these things going on. He's using this military force or trying to in a lot of cases. And it seems as though some of the great colonels, some of the great military people, some of the great people that have served this country admirably are Johnny-come-lately in terms of their denouncement, and they're even getting on a letter to the New York Times or wherever and denouncing this guy for what he's doing. He is really diminishing our capacity in terms of our strength of what people believe about us in military. And people have been sort of kind of late to the table. You haven't, but a lot of people and your colleagues have been kind of late to that. How do you explain that? What do you say to them?
Well, yeah, I'm proud to be a charter member of the Never Trump Club. I opposed his
Absolutely.
From the time he went down that escalator and announced it. Yeah, but there's two schools of thought on this. One school of thought, which I subscribe to, is that once you're retired, you're a citizen of the United States. You have a First Amendment right to speak out and use a political voice. But there's another school of thought that says, mainly for general officers, not people like me who retired at colonel or below, but for those who wore stars, that their allegiance should be to the government, and that they should not jeopardize civil military relations by speaking out, because what that could do in the future, the fear is that what that could do is that politicians will be selective in who they promote to general officer based on loyalty, because they'll be afraid that once these people retire, they'll speak out against the serving administration, and it would politicize the military. So there's these two schools of thought, and they're conflicting with one another. But more and more, what you've seen is that things that Trump is doing are so damaging to civil society that even people who believe the second school of thought are speaking out, like General Mattis came out with a very strongly worded statement, and General Petraeus came out recently. And people who wouldn't have thought about speaking out are now coming out and speaking out, because Trump has crossed so many lines in the sense of civic virtue that they just feel compelled to have their voice heard.
You know, and man, I'm getting so much feedback now on what you mentioned and the question I asked. I hope to get to North Korea and the courts in terms of the funds to the military wall. But I did get a question to you, Colonel, is that how up do you need to be to speak out? That's and that's a question. I mean, you're a colonel, so even if you have some people above you, are you saying that people above your rank probably would not speak out? I mean, you weren't some soldier, and you were a colonel, so I mean. It speaks to the concerns that civilians first don't understand the rankings, but B, just seeing, these pictures of these great generals and other ranks that they're not speaking out against. And again, they're retired. They're not speaking out against this man.
Yeah, most of the forceful voices you're hearing are those who retired at the rank of colonel or below. And those who have worn stars, who have become general or what we call flag officers, they have been more hesitant to speak out, again, because of this fear that if they were to do so, it would somehow jeopardize civil-military relations going forward. And so they believe, many of them believe, it's a very high bar to clear before they should speak out on an issue. There have been those that have spoken out against the Iraq War back in 2006. There was several generals who came out and spoke against the administration. There have been those who have spoken out against various LGBTQ policies, both in the 90s and more recently. There have been those who have spoken out against women in combat. But it's only, in the past few weeks that we've seen a real groundswell of senior officers speaking out against the serving president because they feel what he's doing is so potentially damaging to the social fabric of the United States with his threats to use military force against U.S. citizens.
So I would wonder to you, Colonel, have you spoken with General Petraeus and why now? And I guess the other question I would have is from a moral compass. You listen, like I said, you've been on the never Trump thing from the jump. So I'm not speaking to you and your courage and what you're doing. But a lot of people, I quite frankly, Doc Colonel, that I speak to will say, well, a lot of people will say, well, they're going to write books, they're retired, they're going to live off the pension. Why not speak now? Like, why? Is it that much of a position of getting a job in the White House and not speaking from a moral standpoint? Because like I said, with you from the jump, you were a never Trumper right from the beginning. So you spoke out and you work and everything else. You've written books. So why they don't do that?
Well, I mean, you have some who were on the other side. General Flynn led the chance of lock her up at the Republican National Convention in 2016, if you remember that, right? So there are senior officers who support Trump. And then there's some who have signed the Never Trump pledges, and then there's a whole bunch in the middle who just don't think it's in their place to get involved in a political partisan matter. And I think, I tend to lean on the side of you need to use your voice. But if you believe that that's the case with general officers, then they can use their voice to support the president if they want to as well. It does.
That's true.
There is a threat of politicizing the military, which, but I don't think we're there yet. In terms of General Petraeus, he and I have spoken about an issue that I feel very passionate about, and I have chosen this particular issue as my way of supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, and that's renaming U.S. Army bases and getting rid of the 10 bases, the names of the 10 bases that are named after Confederate generals, along with an 11th Fort Belvoir, which is named after a plantation, and naming them after U.S. Army heroes who served honorably and fought for the United States, not against it. So that's where I'm putting my energy, and that's my way of supporting the recent actions of the protesters.
Amen to that. And even in that, our reflection, our gripe is not to be above, it's to be equality. So even if all those 10 were named after Abe Lincoln, who was on the right side, say what you want about why he did it, but he was on the right side, then that would be fine. So it doesn't even have to be Ida B. Wells or whatever, whoever. It just needs to not be, the Confederate side. That's the issue. So I applaud you in that effort. Talking with Dr. Peter Mansoor, of course, he is a former United States Army colonel, professor of history at Ohio State University here on the Batchelor News radio show. The courts, doctor, have said that this guy occupying the White House cannot use military funds, which I think is just I am not military. As a former colonel yourself, I think it's so deplorable and disgusting that he would want to defer monies from the people who served and protect this country to build a wall. I think is very disgusting and very sad and deplorable for him to do that. And thank God they struck that down. But where do you see this in terms of, I know they're going to appeal. They appeal everything. But the mere fact that these monies are supposed to be foreign and domestic. And we already talked about sort of the domestic side, but those foreign monies are going to people like yourself who risk your life for this country. And he wants to build a wall that doesn't need to be, A, it's not going to be built, and B, Mexico's not going to pay for it, and C, that it has nothing to do with anything other than hate, like other than making Mexican and Latino Americans feel like they're coming here like the boogeyman and taking over. So how do you feel about that decision, and if he can push this forward? Is it enough people, military, as you said, on that side that may be for it?
So actually the money is being taken out of military construction budgets. So, for instance, let's say, I know one project, they need a new parking garage at West Point because the other one is crumbling. And so they had money allocated by Congress to do this. They had money allocated to build new barracks for the cadets. And he's pulled money from those projects to build the wall on the U.S.-Mexican border, a wall that actually won't do anything to stem illegal immigration. And he's denuding these bases around the United States of money for their construction projects. Congress should be absolutely incensed about this. Article 1 of the Constitution is all about the legislative power of Congress, and Congress is ceding that authority to the president. And if they allow this to happen because they're afraid to get voted out in primaries because Trump will oppose them if they oppose him, then they are hamstringing future Congresses to the will of the president. And we are subverting the Constitution. Congress was always supposed to be the most powerful branch of government, always. It wasn't three co-equal branches in the eyes of the founders. Congress was the most powerful. The president was next, and the courts really weren't the third branch of government. They weren't considered that. They were made that by Chief Justice John Marshall. So even the Republican senators should be up in arms. They should have banded together with the Democrats and formed a veto-proof majority to stop the president from doing this. It is extra-constitutional. It is fundamentally illegal, and that's why the courts overturned it. But it shouldn't be the courts that are up in arms. It should be the senators who are up in arms about this. They're the ones that voted the construction funds in the first place.
And think about this, too. It goes back to the point, too, Doc, if you could speak on that, they've allowed, even before this man occupying the White House, they've allowed these presidents to abuse the power, and the power of the purse is in the Congress. If you're going to do these things, whether it be road construction or, like you said, a parking lot for the U.S. Marine Corps or whatever, the money comes from there. They've allowed him to abuse that power. And so how dangerous is that for him, not just now, but if he, heaven forbid, wins the second term and beats Joe Biden? I mean, they have to be comparable and accountable for that mistake if they allow him to continue to do these things because, like you said, they're worried about if they're going to get reelected or not.
Yeah, I mean, they absolutely should be accountable, and the voters need to hold them accountable. And, you know, we should have a self-correcting system called elections in this country. Unfortunately, because of gerrymandering and the polarization of the electorate, that hasn't worked.
Thank you.
But it should be up to the voters to say enough is enough. This man is subverting the Constitution by trying to increase his own power, and it needs to stop.
Yeah, it's really sad, and I didn't spend enough time on Congress doing their job. You know, you want to complain about this guy, then do what you need to do. I know the Senate is a tougher sled, and certainly I have my own opinions about Chuck Schumer and some of the lower court, decisions he's allowed to go through with Mitch McConnell. those are things we could discuss. But in terms of military force, it's been going on really, Doc, from this guy to Obama in terms of his drone thing, to even Bush before that. This authoritarian type of mentality with presidents, I think, has been going on for a long time. That's my own opinion. And Congress has not been doing their job. That's part of the issue.
Absolutely have not. Congress could have put an end to the drone strikes. They could have put an end to all the uses of force by simply revoking the authorization for the use of military force. And the reason they won't do it is they don't want to take responsibility for that vote. They don't.
Right.
They're cowards.
They don't want blood on their hands. You're right.
Or if the terrorists strike and the president says, see, I wasn't allowed to do my drone strikes, and therefore the terrorists have struck the United States and it's Congress's fault, they're basically afraid of what would happen should they withdraw the authorization. Instead, they allow the president basically unchecked power.
Yep. And they use it. And they've been using it for quite some time. Doc, I appreciate you as always. Congratulations on your grand. Be careful and be safe, and I'll talk with you very soon. Thank you for your time, too. Thank you so much.
Thanks, L.A. Take care.
Appreciate you.
If you're looking for politics from a different and fair perspective, then tune in to the Dr. Larry Show, Wednesday from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at blogtalkradio.com and the podcast at thebatchelornews.airtime.pro.
Then to look for what would make you stay.
Welcome back to the Batchelor News Radio Show. We thank you for joining us this evening, and thanks to our guests this evening. It's LA Batchelor with you. I want to go to the phones and bring in one of my good friends and co-host. He filled in admirably for me. I don't know, it's been 2 weeks or so when I was on my little birthday stay away. He is Orlando Hughes in Philadelphia, KRSB radio owner and play-by-play voice. Orlando, Big O, what's going on, my friend?
Well, listen, nothing's going on in LA. I'm just sitting here relaxed in front of the house watching the sunset. So as peaceful as can be.
Yeah, and it's nice to be able to do that. I wanted to. I know we're going to talk a little bit later with Mike Patton and yourself and Tony as we continue to look at this Cam Newton situation and look at some other stuff as it relates to that. One of the things that's been coming up a lot, Orlando, is this way of looking at the climate of racism. You and I have been at the party for a long time. People just joining us, but welcome to the party to some folks out there listening. But there's so many things on social media you see about a lot of these people who are yelling and using the nigger and all this type of stuff, all kinds of different things like that, all those kind of words, because they're upset. And when people are upset and when people are uncomfortable in situations, they lash out. And it hasn't been just, some white men out there that have been upset of this whole movement that we see. You've seen white women. They call them Karens out there. And I want to play something for you because it really speaks to the dangers of when I never say all, but when some white women use 911 and police, or now I've been saying in some cases now, people who are either MAGA people or just fed up and they don't want. I do apologize for that. Some of those women out there not only using 911 to get their way, but also, in some cases, in a lot of cases, are pulling out weapons and guns and things of that nature. So I want to play this for you, Orlando, and get your thoughts after this. And I want to remind people listening, there is some language here. A big shout out to Coach Fancher. I ain't talked to him in a while, but I want to remind people there is some language out there on this that is graphic. So just listen to the 3 minutes or so in its entirety. We'll go from there.
Wants to violate a 15-year-old.
No, I'm asking a question. She's a child.
She bumped into me when I
So
was
if she did something wrong, she needs to apologize. If she did
this
something wrong,
this ignorant woman bumped into a 15-year-old.
Right? Correct.
And you're on camera.
Okay.
You're feeling threatened.
Okay, well, go in.
No, Mom.
I got this.
You're blocking me from getting
No,
my
girl,
No, we
no,
weren't.
you
No, we
can't.
weren't. No, we weren't. You're ignorant.
Go ahead. No, we will, but you're not going to sit there and violate a 15-year-old.
She's ignorant.
Do it, bitch. Do it. Go ahead. Do it. I want you to do something.
She's very ignorant.
Dumbass bitch. Yeah, I said if you say something, I'll beat your white ass too. I will. Do something. Please put your hands up.
Do something.
Please.
Who the fuck do you think you guys are?
Who do you think you are?
are.
You calling her name? She did nothing to you.
Yeah, I did it. I did it.
No,
you didn't. You're very racist and ignorant.
You're racist because you're calling
No,
her
you
name.
bumped it. She bumped it too.
Why would you bump her?
You cannot just walk around calling white people racist. This is not that
Why
type
would
of
you
world.
bump her?
White people
Why
are
would
racist.
you bump her?
No one's
Why
racist.
would you bump her?
I
Why
care
did you
about
say
you.
sorry?
I care
Why
about
did you say sorry?
And I'm sorry if you
Why
had
did you say
an incident
sorry?
that made
If you
someone
bumped
make
into
you
her,
feel
why
like
did you
that.
say sorry?
No one is racist.
If you didn't do
I'm
anything,
sorry
why
if
did you
you
do that?
had something like that happen. Ignorant. Very. Ma, watch.
Get the fuck away from me!
You gonna get on her face.
You better get on my fucking face right now. Get away. Get the fuck away.
Get the fuck
away. Get the fuck away. Are you gonna hit? You gonna shoot me?
Get the fuck away.
Oh.
Get away.
Oh.
Call the cops right now. Call them.
Oh.
Call the cops. Get the fuck away. Call the cops. Get away.
She got the gun on me.
Call them now.
With the car. Call them. I'm telling you.
Call the cops.
Get the license plate. Get the license plate now. Cause you were never about to hit me with the damn car. You about to hit me with the car? Don't get my guns on me. Call Richard back up as the police. Call Richard back up here now. I got it.
Don't you fucking jump behind my
No,
car.
I ain't jumping on your car. What
Don't you fucking jump. Mom, stop moving.
Stop, Mom. Get the fuck back. Back the fuck up.
No, you can't fucking leave. You got all this on video? Yes.
No.
Mom, stop walking.
Hello, police. Call the police. Keep the message. Call the police. Call the police. You fucking
They pulled the gun out on her. These white people, they're so racist. They pulled a gun out on my mama, both of them. It was a white lady and a white man.
Yeah, I got it. They pulled the gun out.
Yes.
There was a couple of things there, Orlando, that are important to mention. Number one, it shows how fast an incident can gravitate to violence. Number two, it shows how people are on the edge. Now, just to let people know what the situation was, it was a white couple, a white woman, and I guess presumably her husband or some significant other, and a young black girl, 15, she said, and her mother at a Chipotle. And apparently, what the young girls told the police and told the newspaper is that she was walking in, the lady was walking out, and she was trying to get out of the way of the lady bumped her, and the girl said, "Excuse you," and a lot of times in our terms, instead of saying "excuse me," she said, like, "Excuse you," like you should have said "excuse me" when you bumped me. And she alleged the lady went off on her. The white woman went off on her, started using all kinds of profanities and whatever, and it escalated from there, and then they went outside. The husband got into it. You heard him saying, "Who the F do you think you are?" And at this point, the mother's trying to defend her daughter, and the daughter's saying these things, and the other side is saying their things, and then they get in their car, and you can hear the white woman saying, "I'm not a racist," and they. And I do apologize. We're having some kind of issue here. So in essence, they got in their car to leave. They backed out towards the young black woman and her mother. The girl, I believe, hit the back rear of the car like, "Hey, wait a minute." And that's when the lady jumped out of her car and pulled out a gun. So I wanted to play that, Orlando, because it speaks to a lot of different things that are going on. it speaks to the environment, and it speaks to the fact that at the end of the day, the tension is there. I wasn't there, so we have to take whatever words are going on. But what's your thought as it relates to this whole Karen movement that we've been hearing about with a lot of white women? Not only, this is even an extended part of this where there's a gun involved, but typically in those Karen moments, if you will, they're calling the police on typically a black man. So what's your thoughts on the dangers of this?
Well, the dangers of this is going to be, the police involvement that will elevate and become another incident that gets out of control. And someone in their mind or their mindset believes that they're so threatened that they need to pull out a firearm as a means to defend themselves because they're in imminent danger. And what's concerning is what gives them the impression that they're in imminent danger. From what you played on the video, both parties seem to be ignorant to each other and not understanding what the other is saying. The woman was incorrect for her actions in the restaurant, but then the young lady made it worse by emotionally responding and smacking the woman's car. And to pull out, you brand your firearm, what danger were you in? You're in your vehicle, LA. What danger are you in? So you get out of your vehicle and you flash your firearm. So that potentially could have elevated into 7 more areas, ending with a loss of life, either to the white people that were there or to the black women that were there. So this country is out of control. It's been out of control forever and a day. But when you put it under a COVID-19 microscope and everyone is at attention, the media is spinning things out of control because there's nothing else to divert people's attention. Right now we're in the end of June. Actually, we're in July, we're in July, and people are worn out from watching movies, watching their Netflix account, watching the Amazon account. How many more movies can you sit and watch? Like for me, I don't even feel like reading a book. Like this is peaceful, sitting outside the house and just relax. Doing the Batchelor Radio Network. But tensions are high because the media has galvanized people. For as many of us that are upset about the assassination, plural, that we've seen, the media has also spun it to those white folks, you're in danger. It's like Chris Rock's Head of State. It was a couple of things that were hilarious in that movie. But the one thing when they said, look, we are about to have your first black president, and you saw all those white people in Southern California run out of their houses screaming, it was satire, but it was appropriate. And for us, because we had 44, and this always stirs up and get the emails coming, but, 44 didn't really do as much as we wanted him to do for whatever reason, and we're not going to get into that right now. So even those bigots, they feel as though, oh, you had your black president. Why are you upset? We recognized June 19th. hey, we're even going to play Lift Every Voice and Sing to open the NFL season next year. You should be happy.
Yeah, Orlando.
Michael Jordan owning teams. You got him. Why are you so upset, LA?
But a couple things. Couple things. I have almost been run over, and I have banged on somebody else's car because they weren't paying attention. That might be a different way of if it was a black man, but my point is that if she was backing up, the girl was like, "Hey, you about to back into me," and she might have thought it was deliberate. I'm not defending the girl being emotional because we want to kind of, stay above that. But that happened. But to your point, if you're in your car, why you don't keep going? Just keep going. Even if you backed out, you didn't have to get out to confront it. My concern, though, in the bigger scheme of things, is that the resistance of change, the resistance of equality, or the lack thereof, because we don't want to be better or worse. We want to be the same. So if we want to be the same, then there's going to be resistance from the power structure. And the power structure is going to do what the power structure does. And my fear, Orlando, is that aside from the guy occupying the White House, is his rhetoric and people having this fear of losing their way of life, is that they are going to carry these guns and they are going to be more confrontational so they can take people out, because at the end of the day, it's not just police officers in this country that look like them that are committing these murders, but it's just regular people who are shooting and saying, I feared for my life. Now, she was arrested. I don't know if she, bonded or whatever the case may be now, but she was arrested. They took the plate down and all of that. But again, if we get into this, our only protection now, Big O, is making sure we have our cameras and we're taking these pictures and taking license plate. The lady could have got unshot and said she feared for her life. They carrying the guns. If they already had the guns, is one thing. Now they're carrying it with their chest out, right? They carried it with this, I wish a black dude would. Like the Cedric side, they doing the opposite of the wish list. I wish they would start, and I will shoot them dead. So that's where it's at now. And that's why I played that, because it escalated to the point where this lady said, you know what, I'm just gonna shoot these people or threaten to shoot them. Thank God nobody got killed. But that's where we are, Orlando. That's my fear.
Sure, no, and it's a legit fear.
Especially with our kids, you know what I'm saying? We got kids, man.
It's a legit fear. So, I just picked up something, to put in my household. Another thing, and I'm not going to be without having arms, because these people are gearing up for a war.
Yeah, a race war is where it's going.
Yeah, but look, we always look at it from their standpoint, but so this is oxymoronic for me to say this, but viewing it from their standpoint, they understand for the most part they'll be non-existent in the next 200 years at the rate that they go.
Right.
Right. They'll be non-existent. So there's a contingency within the group that says, all right, well, look, at least we know we can water down black and we can have mulatto children, so at least our features will still live on. But then you got a group that says, hell no, we won't go. I'm going to stand here and do like what's happening, no Roger, no rerun, no rent. And they're protesting. And sadly, you got the orangutan, you got these other people out there filling people's heads up, and people still believe in politics. Like they think that that's something to be a Republican and to be a Democrat. And it doesn't matter. You know, it's do you have money, white man, or don't you have money? You know, you want to raise your folks, you want to take care of your family, you want to have a little house, and you're entitled to a house, just like we're entitled to a house. You know, that's all we want. I want to sit down and relax. You know, I want my kids to be able to drive to North Carolina and see the Batchelor kids and not be fearful when they see lights flashing in the back of them.
That's right. Let me do this. I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to get, I see Mike Patton on the line, Tony T on the line as well. I'll get to them in a second and talk about Cam Newton and, you know, going to the Patriots. I think it's really it's a square and a circle for me. Cam, as a black man, already leaving North Carolina where they didn't appreciate him. I'll give you stories when we come from the quick break. Going to a place who really hasn't changed when it comes to race relations. They can fluff it up and paint it, but Cam better be an MVP. I know that. He better be an MVP. And even if he ain't an MVP, he's still gonna get the what's up there. But just to Orlando point, I won't be long. I'm just gonna say this real quick. You mentioned the disappointments that some of us, and we've been very critical of President Obama. Doesn't say that he didn't do good things and great things, but he didn't go far enough in a lot of places. I don't like the fact that he continued the drone strikes of countries of color, Gaddafi and all these. Gaddafi gave up his nuclear weapons and they still killed him. So, but that's beside the point. My point is that we as black folks think that we've overcome, and we allow the other side to make us feel like we've overcome. But, I mean, the scripture, if you believe in the scripture said we overcome because of Jesus Christ, but that's a whole different conversation. My point is that I'm not trying to overcome. I'm just trying to be over and be equal. That's really what it's about. It's about equality. We're not trying to be above anybody or below anybody. We just want the playing field to be level. Simple as that. It's that easy. It's that simple. I just want to raise my kids in a safe environment and keep it moving. I see I got some text coming in. I'll read it on the other side of the break. We're going to take this break. I don't want to talk so much. It's Batchelor News Radio Show. Stay tuned.
Greetings and great day, everyone. I am Elder Janelle Strickland, host of the Life Cafe radio broadcast from Maximizing Life Family Worship Center. I invite you to tune in every Saturday from 5 to 6 p.m. Tune in, maximize your life with the Word of God, and be blessed. Only on the Batchelor News Radio Network.
Welcome back to the show. Got a email on Facebook. We're on Facebook Live. You can go to Pat Nation or LA Batchelor, and it said, I don't understand why white people have not caught on that anything they do that looks like, don't like, or even smells like racism is going to be filmed and go viral. But I think the answer to that is that they don't care, which brings me back to the point of they locked and loaded. They frustrated. Just in general, you don't take away people money and their power. You take away that money and that power, and it's going to be a problem. I want to bring in my next guest. Always good to have him on from sportsawakening.com and the Nashville Voice and other outlets, which we'll talk about. He is Mike Patton. And, Mike, always a pleasure to have you on, man. I hope all is well in Tennessee with the virus and, of course, with your family, sir.
Well, pleasure to be on again. We actually were in phase 3, and they actually have reverted back to phase 2, so we're actually going backwards.
Well, again, every state seems to be doing that. They shouldn't have opened it up anyway, but I digress.
That's right.
But we see, and you unfortunately, I don't know if it's necessarily completely down politicalized, but you being in Tennessee, they definitely gonna follow that dude. The dude that occupies the White House. Cam Newton, you and I had some text back and forth. I wanted to get your thoughts before we went on the air about this. And it's a lot of this. Listen, I don't really. I'm not in Cam's fam. Like, Cam's a grown man, and the Cam's gonna do what's in the best interest of him and any family members that come under that decision. So I ain't mad at him. It's legit money. Go do you. So I'm not. That's not where I'm coming from. But I think he tweeted, Mike, about it's a respect. It's a respect factor, being respected, and it's not about the money. But, even Richard Sherman kind of said it best. I mean, you getting minimal salary, you getting $550, you getting the base salary based on your experience in the league. You're a former MVP. You've been to the Super Bowl, and if you had any coaching and some conspiracy people say they wanted, Peyton Manning to go out and yada yada the right way, but you got this resume. Jimmy G wouldn't go to San Fran for no minimum, and Jimmy G did have been to one Super Bowl, but Jimmy G hadn't been to Super Bowl. They hadn't been a league MVP. And so between that and the fact that they're saying he's got to compete for the job and all these things, and we'll get into where he's going, it just smells wrong. It just feels wrong. It's good for him if that's where he wants to be, but the way it went about and the way they're kind of making him kind of acquiesce in a way, it just feels wrong from that standpoint, Mike.
Well, I definitely hear what you're saying, but the ultimate wrong was the Panthers letting him go as late as they did. In that way, they kind of pigeonholed him to where this offer is where we're at now. If they let him go before free agency starts, I don't think he accepts this type of offer. I think by and large he would have had a multi-year deal, but they didn't do him any favors at all. And I think it's a slap in the face to him. Yes. He has to, prove himself for the job, because between him and Jarrett Stidham and Brian Hoyer, are they serious? Are they really serious right now? To me, it's frustrating to hear this, and it's frustrating, to hear that he had to accept that he accepted this offer when he could have probably had something else. But if the Panthers would have actually done right by him and released him earlier, I think he would have had a better offer.
The Panthers and the organization, even though, the minority owner whose name escapes me, he was a minority owner with the Steelers, took over the team, took over the Panthers. They did him dirty even before ownership came in. The new ownership came in, and I remember the year of the Super Bowl where it was played. The city escapes me, but I was there. And I was in a restaurant, and, these Panther fans, I'm saying, okay, it was Panther fans there, older white gentlemen, 4 or 5 of them sitting there, Panthers, and they got all the jerseys on and everything. They're all fired up and talking about, and then I hear them talking about Cam. So I'm thinking, okay, well, they hoping that, he's going to rock the house and ball out. And they're saying, well, we can't stand Cam. He's pompous, he's arrogant, and I hope the Broncos defense six that ball up his. You know what? But they're rooting for the Panthers, but they're rooting against him. And that wasn't the first time I heard that. As we are press members, we hear things when we're in the press, and we even with the press, I've heard negative stuff about Cam. The Cam has brought a few things, but not many, a few things on with some of the antics he's done, but he's never been respected as a bona fide quality quarterback. He's even evolved with his passing over the years. So what do you think is going to happen with the fans in a place that, when I was driving up there, you had to be out of Boston in that area at a certain time of the day? Because if you weren't, then you might have been in a situation, God forbid, where you could lose your life or something along those lines. And a lot of that, from all accounts that I understand from people that I know that still live in the area, hasn't changed. So if it's as bad as Andy Griffinville is North Carolina is, where do you think he's going to get up in Foxborough and Boston and all those areas?
Well, I think between the lines, he's probably going to get probably judged on wins and losses. But outside those lines and with his personality, of course, you're going to get the Barstool type talk about his personality and toning it down and not being this or that and the other. And, that type of crap is going to always follow him. But, that's what I think he's probably going to, have to expect going in there, is people that are going to basically be on him wins, losses, whatever. If he wins, they'll love his antics and be like, it's not that big a deal. If they lose, then it's going to be the main reason they're losing, which honestly it probably won't be. But to me, he's in a situation where he can, be either great on the field or, bad on the field. There's no gray area for him to be average or at least, serviceable or anything of that nature up there, because they're gonna ride him out. They're gonna ride him out one way or the other.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. We're going to talk about the Arthurville stuff. We'll talk with Mike Patton here on the Batchelor News Radio Show. 646-929-0130, the number. Get in touch with us there. Press 1 to get online so we can see you on the screen. And you can also hit us up with questions and comments at Pad Nation on Facebook or LA Batchelor, and on Twitter at Pad Nation 2. Lose the live feed in about 15 minutes, so dial in at that number if you want to be live. In the meantime, it goes to my good friend and colleague and co-host, Tony T. Mac McClain.
Hey, Mike. What's going on at Tennessee State? Are they have any athletes tested positive, and where are they at right now? I know the OVC is going to have their media day soon, but where are the Tigers at right now heading into the season?
It's pretty mum right now, to be honest. Players are probably doing their own different training and things like that, but as far as the school, not much is going on. Which I have to talk to the athletic director. He actually, the new athletic director there, is basically essentially just took over. In case you didn't know, Teresa Phillips had been the athletic director for 18 years there, and she just officially retired. The official retirement just happened. So the new athletic director comes from the University of Tennessee, and his name is Mickey Allen. So he's getting started there, and he's starting his regime there. So that's the biggest news right now. Other than that, a lot of quiet around the football team and the start of the season, or if there's going to be a start of the season right now.
And, every day we seem to hear more about players testing positive and venues getting changed and all. Is it going to be even worth it to even try to do college and pro sports this year, in your opinion?
Is it going to be worth watching, or worth actually just is it worth watching, you said?
All of the above.
Okay. Well, honestly, the first thing I think about is the health of these kids, first and foremost. There's a lot of people that probably don't think about the health of these kids because they think, it's COVID. They probably have a Mike Gundy way of thinking of, they're healthy and strong, they'll be okay. But to me, that's the first thing I'm worried about, the health of these kids. I don't want these kids exposed just for a game and our entertainment. No. So if they can provide a safer way there, I'm not saying, you just don't do anything, but if they can provide safety for these kids, which I find hard to believe in such a contact sport of football, that you can make it where, you can make it as safe as possible. I find it hard to believe. But, the show's going to go on more than likely. The NCAA is going to try to find a way because they're scared of losing their precious dollars, and they're going to, in that aspect, expose kids. And I don't think it's worth it to expose kids unless you actually have an actual plan that has their bodies and minds in line. And basically you have them.
I got you.
That's the thing with me.
But thank you, sir.
Go ahead, Orlando.
What's going on, Mike? How you feeling, brother?
I'm doing just fine, man. Just riding it out in Tennessee, man.
Yeah, that's all we can do. This is the unknown ocean that we're on in 2020, for sure. Who knows where it leads us? But I want to spin and stay in the NFL for a second. And it's a topic that we've all discussed to where we were nauseous. So I guess we need to get sick again. But what do you think about FedEx putting pressure on the team in D.C. and Mr. Snyder's team and asking them to change their name?
Well, I think it's kind of long overdue. But, I had a friend of mine who's actually in PR. She said something pretty interesting when it came to FedEx and them changing their name and things like that. She said it isn't like it's not going to happen overnight, which I definitely understand that. It's not going to happen overnight. There's merchandise, all those things that they have to think about when they make that change. Now, she's a black woman, so she's not saying that she's not for the change. She's just basically giving all the different aspects that go into it. So if we are to see a change, do I think it'll happen this year? No, but, when you put sponsors and you put pressure and, owners talking dollars and cents. They don't talk in logic. So when you keep going on with this, and they keep pulling away money and threatening to pull away money, owners will perk up and listen at that point. They'll make it seem like they care, but they care about dollars. And as long as they're losing dollars, they'll make those changes needed. You got to hit them where it hurts, and the pockets are it.
Orlando, one other thing I wanted to ask you about as it relates to Cam, and then just get your thoughts on sports returning, college and pro, is assuming if he's a starter, and he should be, and by all accounts he's healthy enough to be, where do they fit? I know they got some form of a running game. The offensive line still is questionable, in my opinion. But if all goes well in terms of the offensive line and running game, can the Patriots make the playoffs? If so, how far can they go? Mike, are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm right here.
Okay. Did you hear what I said?
Oh, I thought you were talking to Orlando, not me.
No, I was talking to you. No, I was talking to you, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, my apologies. But, as far as the Patriots, yes, they can always be a playoff team because you have Bill Belichick there. The mastermind is always at work. But with that offense, the reason why I think actually Cam has a great chance to succeed is because the biggest thing with Cam and his success has always been the running game. He has Sonny Michel back there. If he can stay healthy, James White. You get those two running the football. They probably throw another back in there. That running game gets going. That opens up Cam for easier passes. Everyone talks about Cam's accuracy, but it's easy to make passes when you have a wide window and the running game is working. So I definitely think they can make the playoffs. I definitely think that offense, provided the running game makes things happen, that offense has a chance to be potent and, do well. And I definitely think they'll make the playoffs, if not, vie for the Super Bowl again.
Yeah, so you think that the coordinator will be able to or will want to adjust playing style of Cam and the way they use the backs, in particular this kid now that's a star in Carolina, that they would make all those adjustments to build it around him?
I think they can make those changes because, their offensive coordinator, let us not forget, he actually won games with Tim Tebow as quarterback.
Right.
As awful as Tim Tebow was. So if you don't think he can win with Cam Newton and he won with Tim Tebow and made that offense look like anything, then you're sadly mistaken.
With the whole situation, and I'll ask the guys before we get out of here, returning, again, it's a redundant question for some, especially with Orlando and Tony. You look at the NBA players and you looked at college players, football and basketball, that are being infected by or been affected by this virus. Now, all they're going to do, as you mentioned, if they come back, and Tony asked about Tennessee State, they come back, they have the virus and they take it back home. Pro players, the same thing. You take it back to your wife and kids, or whatever the case may be. Why? And how do you even make it, from the NBA standpoint, how do you even make it work if you got the Andre Jordans of the world who are stars on their teams that already said, I'm not going to Orlando for the safety of me and my family, but my fellow teammates? Why even try to do that? We know they want them to make the money, but is the NBA is certainly not hurting that much, where they're not in a position, just like the NFL, where they basically print money.
Can I address that one?
Sure.
Okay, one of the things that a lot of people are not talking about when it comes to them not playing or playing in terms of the NBA is the collective bargaining agreement. Huge thing there. And everyone talks about LeBron maybe pushing to play or anything like that. One guy nobody's talking about who's actually pushing for them to probably play is Chris Paul, because he's the president of and the thing is, if they don't play or at least attempt to play and then the league calls it off, then it's on the league at that point. It's not on the players. If it's on the players and the players just, say, hey, we're not playing, then that whole CBA goes away. And they can rewrite it, and the power that the players have earned over the years goes away. And let me put it in a little bit of a numbers scenario for you. I got a friend of mine that actually we were talking about this. Donovan Mitchell's due for a huge mega extension out there in Utah, right? It'll be about 120, 130. I don't know. I may be shortchanging it. Say this CBA gets torn up and they start back from the beginning again. You want to know how much he could potentially be making a year or go down to over the length of his deal? About $90 million. About $90 million.
Ouch. So Mike, from your standpoint, understanding the CBA, you're saying that if all but most of the players want to come back for that very reason, not the fact that they want to oblige the owners or the league or even the fans, they want to come back so that the CBA doesn't be destroyed. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's part of it. Part of it's because they want to play. Part of it's because they want to fulfill their jobs. Another part of it is because of the CBA, and that's huge. That basically the owners, as much as you want to say the owners care, the owners don't care. The owners are about dollars and cents. Just like I said about the NFL and Daniel Snyder, dollars and cents. And if they don't play, and when you see that, they can basically tear up this CBA and make a new one, and then basically hit the players in their pockets, basically. Tony,
do we know if and I know you follow a lot of the, with the CBA, if baseball, maybe that one of the reasons players want to come back to the NFL, is that part of their issue too with the CBA? We kind of conjecture on that.
It's with all of them, because
here's
the thing, and like Mike said, it's more on the owners, because let's be honest, with all of this waxing poetic about how we need sports to come back and all this other stuff, it's a money grab. It's like the line from the SMU documentary. There are payrolls to be met, and these folks are tired of losing X amount of money every day. As much as the owners in baseball tried to, we'll play 100 games. No, we'll play 70. Well, we'll play 90 games. No, we'll play 60. They just want to get a little bit of their recup back. They don't give a damn about the players at all, I don't think, in either league. I just think that this is a money grab, and they're going to throw it under the disguise of patriotism and wanting and trying to make a political statement. But no, it is. The sad thing is, and I'm not trying to go too far off, but unless several players drop graveyard dead, they're going to try to play this thing this year. That's the sad irony.
And Orlando, I would think too, and I'm going to go to Mike, I know he's got to go, but Orlando, I would think too that, especially with the NBA, the way that it is structured, that it can't be about winning for these owners this year other than playing this year, because if you have a star player in this whole playoff scenario setup that they have with the 9 seed and you got to play in and all this other, what is it, 22 teams or something like that along those lines. If you lose star players, Chris Paul or somebody gets sick, then you still got to play these games. And if you lose your star players going, you're probably not going to do well in this postseason structure that they have, Orlando. So it can't be about winning a title. It's more about getting these butts back on the field so they can make that money.
It's definitely financial. That's the bigger thing. They lost a litany of money, from gambling to ancillary money that they've lost with hotels and businesses and so on and so forth. So there's pressure throughout to get this event going again, and really, they're weighing the odds that if they provide A, B, and C, then D and E doesn't consist of the coronavirus. And I'm sure Mike knows, but if you look at what's available to these players while they're in Orlando in the quote-unquote bubble, you'd be amazed at what they're providing. So they want a service. They need to get these local television contracts, and they need to satisfy these national contracts. And they even have some global contracts that they need to fulfill. And they're going to put the product out there. And like Tony says, how dead are you? Lose one player. And I'm being facetious, people, as I say that, but that's the attitude. At least that's the apparent attitude. Like, you may have to look at someone becoming critically or critical. And it's just not the players. Like, you got to figure the coaches, the trainers, the staff that's going to be there. You need everyone to do it right. And this is the NBA, which kind of has the best plans. Major League Baseball, I know, Tony, I know that shit's sport, but, man, what the hell are they thinking about? You going to really go on a plane and fly from city to city and think that's going to work in today's environment?
See,
But you know the thing,
Orlando, you make the terrible analogy of thinking and Major League Baseball in the same sentence. So
that's true.
But you know what though? But you know what? The
Let me check
NBA and
this cup.
baseball, the NBA
really.
and baseball is in the same. NBA and baseball in the same spot because baseball trying to do Arizona is a hot spot for the virus, and the NBA in Florida playing in Orlando is a hot spot. So they're both in bad spots, if you will.
And they're both off the table now, well, especially for Major League Baseball because you had a bunch of the Phillies test positive and a bunch of the Blue Jays and what have you. But at this point in time right now, let's see. There's pressure on all four, but and I think this is one time where everybody's whatever because even the NHL, who had 8 solid venues up until about a week ago, just lost a couple. And again, this is a day-by-day basis because every day we hear more about and see, it's never like one player. It's always a group. It's always like, well, 6 of them tested positive today, and 12 of them tested positive today, and so on and so on. See, it's not, and the thing is, remember, we know that there's going to be more along the way. Literally at some point, it's like, what kind of madness is this? At some point, someone's got to be the adult in the room, and I'm sorry, even the kids are looking at them saying, "What the hell are you guys trying to do?"
Right, and let's be clear. We know that we're not we're not getting all the numbers of COVID, people who are affected with COVID-19 in a civilian place in mainstream society. We're certainly not getting it with sports. I would imagine. Mike, final thoughts for you. It's one thing, and listen, we can't be in I can't judge someone's heart and their motives, but you can go by their body of work, and you can kind of assume in certain situations. The NBA and the NFL, NHL, baseball, we know where their motives are. We know what the owners are doing. We know why they want them to play. We just discussed all that. But there are people that are naive about college, and we're not naive because college prints money too. But my question to you is, do you think or do you have knowledge that a Tennessee State, which is historically black playing in the OVC, is in a better position even before the virus, not before the virus, but because of the virus, is in a better position to open their doors playing in a PWI conference as opposed to, say, we just saw Morehouse, who shut down all of their fall sports. Done. They're not playing them.
LA, there's an update. The SIAC has shut down all fall sports.
Okay, so the whole freaking conference is shut down.
Yeah,
but you may have a couple of teams that play. You can still play, but you will function as an independent for Division II this year. So there's a couple, Savannah State and possibly Tuskegee, that wants to play football this year. Go figure. But
because of their status, right? And
right.
And so I guess my question is Tennessee State on solid ground because they're in that conference? Have you heard anything different about them? Because there is some differences, as we know. Is the reason why the Hamptons and the A&Ts made their moves and that's part of it, to go to these PWIs to have sort of these covers, if you will, for when these type of situations take place.
Honestly, as far as Tennessee State, I know they're just monitoring and still keeping up with the situation and as it changes day by day. I don't think they necessarily. I will say this: the OVC is cool. I actually played in the OVC, so I give you a perspective from covering it and actually being in it.
Right.
But one thing I can say is with the OVC, I don't think they're I think they're going on par with what the OVC's saying, but I don't think they're like have a leg up or anything like that or any other kind of thing. It's just the OVC's taking a longer time, which historically they always take a longer time on everything because they're the OVC. That's really all I got with the OVC in terms of I'm gonna leave it there. I'm not gonna talk too bad about them.
Listen, hey, look, you got to cover them. I get that, but it's interesting that where Tennessee State is, and there's a lot of rumors. I've been getting some texts and stuff about people trying to push them through. I don't think that's going to happen in terms of trying to snatch them up and bring them back to HBCUs. I don't think that's going to happen. But
it's not going to happen because the check's not going to match up.
Right. I mean, that's a lot of part of it. You getting used to that cool meal. You don't want to take 500 foul. You want that cool meal.
Right.
So whatever the number is, just making it up. Mike, before you go, let people know how they get. Go ahead.
I'll give you this though. They are scheduling more SEC teams to play or bigger schools to play in the next few years. I think that's a testament to Mickey Allen. So you could potentially see that if they can make up that difference with that type of money, potentially. That'd be the only way I could see it happen.
If they move to an SEC, you said?
If they move to an HBCU, or if they move to, if they move to like a swag or anything of that nature, the only way I could see it happening is if they pick up bigger games in terms of the non-conference schedule.
Oh, playing like the Southeastern Conference. I got you.
Yeah.
I got you.
Mm-hmm.
I got you. So then they do make up that money. So that makes sense. Mike, before you go, let people know how they can reach out to you and follow you, sir.
You can reach me on Twitter at MikePatton82, Instagram _general_MP. You can reach me at goodness gracious, 3-point conversion, and probably a litany of other places too. Maybe I didn't get myself a link tree.
Yeah, man, you're gonna have to just put it under like one umbrella because we're proud of you, man. You're doing your thing, and certainly great writing. We appreciate you, Mike, as always. You and the fam be well. We'll have you on soon. Thank you, sir. All right. Mike Patton here on the Batchelor News radio show. Going to wrap up with Tony T. Mac McLean and Big O Orlando Hughes shortly. Stay tuned.
Join Barry Barnes for Locker Talk on the Bachelor Pad Network as he presents NFL news and evaluates players. Fridays at 9 a.m. Eastern at blogtalkradio.com.
Welcome back to the show. As we wrap up, thanks to all of our guests. Again, if you missed any part of the broadcast, go to our website, not just for our show, but of course the shows within the network. It's thebatchelornews.airtime.pro, thebatchelornews.airtime.pro. You can hear my broadcast, the rebroadcast of it at 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. every day at that website. Just click on it and listen. You'll hear Tony T. Mac McLean, Big O, Orlando Hughes, any discussions we have, and any of our guests. Speaking of which, want to bring them back in. I'll start with you, Orlando. And, when you look at what he said and what the question was, is Tennessee in a better spot being HBCU, historically black college for people listening who don't know what that is, and a PWI, which is predominantly white institution or league or conference? Are they in a better position than, say, some other historically black conferences that are still in black conferences when it comes to crises that we see in this pandemic, Orlando?
I would kind of say yes. Tennessee State's been in the OVC since the late 80s, and they've had their success. And I was watching something today, and I'll send it to both of you tonight, a documentary produced by some young folks, and they showed 8 HBCU institutions that had a budget over $10 million. Only 8 out of all the schools. And of those 8, they did not even compete with the Appalachian State, whose budget was $20 million, right? Mm. They were 900% less than the University of Texas, which was $165 million, which basically which basically is all of the HBCUs folded together. Don't have the budget of the University of Texas. So, and the thing about it is, there are some coaches within the HBCU ranks, some of them have passed on, transitioned to ancestors, who didn't believe in this whole intermingling thing. And the more and more we talk about this all the time, I think we're our own worst enemies, because this generation, they can't even connect with the students and the neighborhoods that they are in the 2000s. And I don't know what it is that made people stop, but they were interviewing some young ladies who went to FAMU, and the young lady's like, I'm a University of Kentucky fan. Okay, well, I like Villanova too, but if Nova played Norfolk State, which they have twice, and I won't mention the scores of those matchups, I'm still rocking out with my green and gold. So we're to say we have problems is stating the obvious, but the problem goes even deeper. And this documentary that I saw, and it was actually today, was just talking about that. Like, wow, what are we going to do? Because what was uniquely HBCU and the experience of coming to a black college game goes back into the 40s, and it hasn't changed since then. But we haven't embraced it, because you hear T-Mac mention all the time, and you know, Reggie as well, and yourself all talking about some of these universities think that they're going to get people to come to the game because I'm a Morehouse man. And, you know, you come for the Morehouse nostalgia. No, you come for sports. You come for sports. And sports should then spawn you to what is Morehouse about? What is Tennessee State about? What is Alcorn State about? But the answer to your question is Tennessee State in a better position being in the OVC as opposed to being in an HBCU conference right now? Absolutely. They're in a better position. They're making more money out of their conference. And they travel even further than the MEAC schools do in their conference, and they're still making money. So go figure.
Yeah. And same question to you, Tony. I mean, we've been covering this forever. I think I didn't even hear about the whole SIAC shutting it down for the fall sports, but certainly that speaks volumes of even the conference. We were just talking about teams, but in the conference shutting down, what does that say? You know, overall picture. You know, the SIAC compared to, say, the ACC.
Well, even though, like you said, TSU may be in a better situation because they're in the OVC, I think it's safe to say that the at least going back to the when the pandemic first started, right in the middle of championship week with hoops, I would have to say that the four conferences have been ahead of this from day one. And so, yeah, they'll, TSU may be in a little bit of a whatever, but at this point in time right now, ain't nobody going to be playing anyway, so it's almost like a who cares thing, sadly. But big picture-wise, it's interesting to see where TSU is right now, especially in light of the jockeying between the SWAC and the MEAC over the last couple of weeks. And yeah, it's probably going to take a sweetheart deal for TSU to even to consider moving out, even moving to the SWAC. But stranger things have happened, I guess.
Like you said, I think Orlando said it. They've been in the OVC since the '80s, so it must be working for them.
Oh,
so
sure.
they're still there. So
you can't you can't hate on them because
definitely.
Yeah, and we've been talking. Needless to say, we've been talking a lot about this. I do have to admit, I think I think the MEAC gets it now, especially after seeing their news conference last week, sort of picking up the pieces after the gang from Florida told them to, you ain't got the, we're not leaving you, but we're gonna be separated for a little bit.
Yeah, that's and they're saying all the right things, Orlando. They're saying, we're going to stay the course, and we believe in the MEAC, and at least that's what Commissioner Thomas said, and some of the other presidents of the schools there that are still remaining, and we'll see what happens. We don't know what they have in mind to replace. It's going to be hard. It's hard to replace two, but they got four at least if they want to do it like that, to replace those four that left. So, Orlando, it's interesting.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely interesting. And there's a interview that was done by some other folks who sponsor HBCU sports. And they were interviewing the commissioner of the Atlantic Sun Conference. And he is actively pursuing not one, but several HBCUs to not be named. Mm-hmm. And he's talking about bringing them in, and some things that'll be that folks want to be black right now. Black is the thing in 2020 in this COVID thing. So
black is the new orange.
Right. Everyone wants to say what's up, my nigga. This summer and be down. The BET was on CBS. Like, come on. It was this. We're in a progressive state of mind.
Orlando, have you heard? Guys, have you heard now? Apparently, if the NFL starts off on week one, apparently before the games, they're going to play
Leftover Voice to Sing.
Sing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What about police reform?
Yeah.
What about black owners? Well, come on, sing.
No, nothing. But LA, to answer your question, man, it's for the MEAC. They have to circle the camp with the schools that they have. One more gets out and leaves the chicken coop, and that's it for that whole den or flock of birds. They'll be devoured. I think they need to seriously sit down and talk to the SWAC if they want to talk about nostalgia. Or, listen to the A Sun, and it never fails when I'm on the phone with you that somehow, some way, that a motorcycle will go by 2 blocks away, and it never fails.
I bet you it's the same guy.
Never
I bet you it's the same guy too, right?
Yeah, never fail.
But listen, I'll say this. Let's hope the black is not the new orange, because we got an orange occupying the White House. Let's hope it's the new something else, exactly. And not the new orange. But I mean, it's sad, but change is happening, changes, and they're gonna have to catch up with the change if they want to survive and keep their doors open. And the SIAC is certainly what they're doing is certainly definitely making a statement in terms of where they are or where they're trying to prevent or maybe being proactive to keep their doors open. We don't know all what's going on there, but we shall see what happens. Orlando Big Hill Hughes, and of course, and Tony T. McLean, thank you as always. If you missed any part of the broadcast, make sure you go to our website, check out all of our info, thebatchelornews.airtime.pro, thebatchelornews.airtime.pro. Our show is on at 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. Eastern Time. There's a lot of other shows up there, music, other discussions. We try to keep it thought-provocative, and thanks to these guys to make that happen. Enjoy your evening. Make sure you tune in tomorrow to Locker Talk with Barry Barnes at 9 a.m. talking about the NFL players of tomorrow today, and live with Liza as she talks about social and racial and other issues that plague black and brown people. Enjoy. Talk to you soon on the Batchelor News Radio show on the Batchelor News Radio Network.